Welcome in, everybody. I wish it was under better circumstances. Rockets fall tonight, 121-110 in San Antonio in the opener of the NBA Cup, the first game of the bracket, which is a very, very tough bracket for the Rockets. It's, as they were talking about in postgame, the bracket of death. Rockets fall to the Spurs in what is probably their biggest test since the Pistons game, or maybe even OKC. And Ben, the esteemed Ben DuBose, is here with me. Ben, this was a tough one, man. We wanted this one. We've been talking about it for probably 5 games back, how they would look against Wemby, how they would, match the hot start that San Antonio has, and the rebounding was a shock.
Yeah, it was, especially on offense with Keldon Johnson having 5 offensive boards and keeping several possessions alive. Rockets had 23 turnovers, many of them self-inflicted. But really the biggest takeaway I had, Dave, and it's sort of depressing, but the Spurs are for real. This was a San Antonio team without De'Aaron Fox, without Dylan Harper. And, the game got away from the Rockets midway through. They were outscored 36-12 from about 3 minutes left in the first half to, I think, midway through the third quarter. And, some of the point guard issues were on display. But down the stretch of the game, the Rockets really worked. I thought Alperen Sengun in particular, late in the third, early in the fourth quarter, did some big things. Like his motor was on high. He did get into foul trouble, but when he was out there, he made some things happen. KD, even with the 8 turnovers, there was a stretch where he caught fire in the second half. And the Rockets got back within 103-100 with 7 minutes left. And it felt like, okay, this is one of those games. Each team's going to make their runs. And then you're the Rockets with Kevin Durant. The Spurs, they don't even have a point guard. Now, I know the Rockets don't, but neither did the Spurs tonight. And so, in theory, that should offset. You have Kevin Durant. You have Alperen Sengun. I know they have Wemby, but you have at least 2 top-shelf playmakers. And, what I was thinking midway through the fourth quarter was that the Rockets, with their experience and their additional playmaking, should be able to figure this out. But down the stretch of that game, the Spurs got basically every shot they wanted. Harrison Barnes, it was ridiculous how many open threes he was getting, made 6 on the night. So many throughout the game were just wide open looks from the corners. And yeah, the Spurs made a lot of threes at volume, but they were good looks. They were in rhythm. Wemby deserves a lot of credit, obviously, for the attention that he draws. He's improved as a passer throughout his career. But for the Spurs to do that without Dylan Harper, without De'Aaron Fox, down the stretch against the Rockets, as tough as the Western Conference is, and, I'm not going to blow one game out of proportion. There's a lot of things the Rockets can clean up. But we knew in terms of the ultimate goal of contending for a title this year, the Thunder are going nowhere. The Denver Nuggets should be really good. To me, the San Antonio Spurs made a statement tonight that barring a Wemby injury, they're going to be relevant. This is not a team that started 5-0 and is going to fade back to the pack. No, I was just so impressed. And, the Rockets are going to focus on all the things that they can control. Ime Udoka in his postgame press conference talked about, getting out hustled and the Spurs out toughed them. But I also think they just got out executed. When it mattered in the half court, the Rockets defense was just slashed, and it looked nothing like the top 5 defense we saw a year ago.
Absolutely.
You posted some comments on the screen about the zone, and that didn't help. But at the same time, I feel like, what is Ime going to do until they get Dorian Finney-Smith back? Because without DFS, without Fred VanVleet, it's tough for them to run a conventional lineup with 5 players that are going to be good enough offensively. They can run 5 good defenders, but they're not going to be good enough offensively. And so if you go with the types of guys that will give you a chance to score, then there's going to be a trade-off. And so without Fred, without DFS, it's just, they went a little bit too much zone for my liking. Reed got exposed in a couple of possessions late, although he was great for the game overall. Steven Adams, it was not his best game. But I just come out of it thinking, what else could Ime realistically have done? They didn't have the horses, and the Spurs just exposed them down the stretch. To me, that's the biggest takeaway. I know the middle of the game was frustrating, but the Rockets fought back. It was anybody's game midway through the fourth quarter, and then the Spurs just sliced and diced them down the stretch of that game.
Yeah, definitely some things that stick out to me about this game. Rebounding was such a key part. Keldon Johnson couldn't keep him off the offensive glass. Stephon Castle got 2 big offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter, and the second chance points, they got destroyed there, 33-21. Ime Udoka talked after the game. By the way, he looked stone-faced. Yeah. He looked angry. They asked him point blank if, Şengün got into foul trouble in the third quarter, picked up his fourth foul, I think midway through the third, sat out for a good stretch as a result. And they asked him if that, how much that took him out of what he wanted to do offensively. And he just looked stone cold and was like, it didn't. And that's the silence afterwards. And it's like, he's not happy. I think obviously you hoped to have that upgrade with KD, and he obviously is offensively. And you came into this game with the number one offense. It has worked extremely well. Defensively, you've improved over the last few games. You've moved up, but Ime Udoka's calling card is defense. Yeah. And for some of those wide open threes, staggering. Champagne or Barnes, there was that one play in the fourth quarter. And, part of this is also Reed Sheppard being a little bit inexperienced. Reed Sheppard was terrific tonight. I'm not picking on him. I'm just saying there was a play, I think, where both Reed and Şengün went after the ball handler, and Barnes got the pass, was so wide open. He did basically a James Harden on Wesley Johnson type of thing where he just was going to shoot it. And he's like, wait, no, stop. I'm going to reposition. I'm going to set. And he just took all day, drained it. And it just really, to me, was kind of a little bit embarrassing to the point where you're like, if they're giving up these open threes, teams are going to be able to knock these down. And if you match the physicality of the Rockets, Rockets have been terrific from three, but they're not shooting high volume of them. They're going with KD in mid-range. They're going with Şengün in the post, a man on cuts. They're trying to beat you with a lot of twos and lower volume threes. So if a team matches your rebounding, and as far as the Rockets are concerned, and shoots effectively from three, they're going to beat the Rockets.
Yeah, and tonight you look at the three-point discrepancy. The Spurs made 18 to the Rockets 13, even though the Rockets shot well. Look, if you give up 40% on threes to a team that gets off 45 of them, and it wasn't like the Rockets made bad shoot. No, I mean, Barnes and Champagne had 6 apiece. Devin Vassell had 4, so that's 14 between those three guys. Like, those three starters for the Spurs outshot the entire Rockets team in terms of made threes. And so I'm right there with you in terms of watching Ime postgame. I thought, like, this has to really sting for him because we know what his identity is as a coach. And for all that team's flaws last year, they did reflect his identity. I'm not saying that this team can't, but it's going to take a while. And it may take until at least Dorian Finney-Smith comes back, because right now what they have to turn to be able to execute late in a close game, it really costs them on the defensive end. And yeah, we can nitpick here and there. Sure, there were some sloppy turnovers, and maybe they should have played Clint Capella more. I thought he looked really good in the first half. And then, Steven Adams was out there when they got destroyed late in the second half, or late in the second quarter. And then I don't think Capella played in the second half at all. Like, there's little things you can question like that. But by and large, look, the Spurs got the shots they wanted. They destroyed the Rockets from a math perspective. And I also thought, one of the big questions with the Spurs, we talked about their overall youth and, the obvious storyline of can Wemby stay healthy. They have a relatively unproven coach in Mitch Johnson. I thought he looked tremendous tonight. Down the stretch of that game, especially coming out of timeouts, the Spurs looked very composed. Quite frankly, they looked a lot more composed than the Rockets did. Like, I do agree, like, the narrative that Stan Van Gundy was pushing on the Prime broadcast about the Rockets not having a point guard. I mean, there's some truth in that, although Reed did play really well. Now, the question becomes, when Reed is in, is he going to get targeted defensively, which he was down the stretch of that game a little bit. But I also thought a lot of the turnovers, it wasn't like the Rockets couldn't handle the ball and were just getting picked in the half court, or in the back court, excuse me. No, it was in the half court that they were just making, poor reads, poor decisions. I saw so many possessions, especially in the first half, where, Amen Thompson and KD would leave their feet and turn the ball over because they left their feet without a clear plan. And I think a lot of games, there'd be, an outlet valve that they could turn to, but that wasn't there with Wemby. So when the primary read wasn't available, and then you don't have that big you can kick it to as a security blanket, because when Wemby's 7'5", excuse me, I mean, it just gets really difficult. And, could some of that be improved if you had Fred VanVleet out there? Of course. But at the same time, it's like, look, man, you're going to get the ball to Kevin Durant, and he's going to draw doubles because he's Kevin Durant. He needs to just be smarter. Amen Thompson has drawn praise. Look at what Steve Nash said about him pregame, one of the best point guards in NBA history. Look at what Jason Kidd said the other night. I thought he was disappointing tonight, making plays going towards the basket. Like, a point guard would help, but some of this is just the guys they have need to be better and weren't. And, some of it's on the personnel. Guys need to play better. I also thought, the Rockets didn't look as prepared as the Spurs were. And that's another thing. Like, it's not me saying I have anything, negative to say about Mitch Johnson. He's just so unproven that the obvious question is, hey, can a team with a relatively novice coach compete at the highest level? I don't know. It's one game out of 82. There's no reason to act like this is representative, but it's just one of many areas that the Spurs looked very, very legit, and the Rockets took yet another close loss to a good team.
Yeah, and I got to say, it really was, I don't want to say it was tale of two halves because it really started late in the second quarter, but the Rockets were roughing up, I thought, the Spurs, playing them quite well. Rockets built the lead. I think it might have got to 11. They were at least up by 10 and kind of felt in control. They sure enough put Josh Okogie on Wemby to start the game. We talked about that and kind of thought that would be the case, and he was very effective. Wemby at one point, I think by early third quarter, was minus 18 when he was on the court, which is staggering because he's been, the key to their defense, like something like a 20-point swing in defensive net rating for the Spurs when he's on the floor. But it was the total opposite. But the Rockets had a double-digit lead, closed the quarter. The Spurs did the second quarter, the half 12-0 run, which was really disappointing. And then it just continued into the early third quarter. KD, I'm just going to name a few different things. Obviously, the 8 turnovers. Jabari was probably the only guy rebounding, but at the same time did not have a good game, was minus 19 in his 26 minutes. I know he didn't play the fourth. I don't think we saw him. I have to go back.
He had a couple of shots in the third quarter he should have made, and it just felt like it wasn't his night.
It wasn't. 2 for 6 from the field. Şengün definitely stepped up later in the game. I think he might have had 17 of his 25. Maybe it was 19, but I think it was 19 of his 25 in the second half. He did help the Rockets get to within 3 before the Spurs pulled away. I'm just going to say this about Şengün. We gave him so much praise after that OKC game because he had made that leap from 3-point range. 5 of 8 in that game was awesome. And I was just like, wow, this changes my view of Şengün. A game like this where Wemby's sagging off of him and he's got that shot. He took 6 tonight. He's 1 for 6 overall. He hit 1 at the end of the third quarter. He's now 5 of 19 from 3 since that game. Got to see this be a real thing and not slip back into what, if he wants to be up there with, past Sabonis and up towards Jokic, he's got to add a 3-point shot, a good one. Agreed. They can't leave him open. He had some good moments, but overall just not, his most efficient night. And of course, 4 for 12 from the field. Let's talk about one really good silver lining, and that was Reed Sheppard. I apologize. I had all the clips together. I've had some technical difficulties. I don't have them to play. But boy, in the first half, my mind was blown. Wemby was, like I said, I think at halftime or something like that, negative 17. Reed was leading the Rockets at plus 13 when he was on the floor and making good plays. If you want to see what the vision is for Reed Sheppard, watch this game. Defensively, sure, there's a few things that have come up, and they're not going away. They're going to have to get better. But his offense tonight was terrific. And so he showed you a little bit of the vision of what this guy could be. And that's on the heels of the last game where he was pretty darn good. So hopefully this is the start of something on the upswing for Reed Sheppard.
Yeah, I was sort of blown away by, I'm trying to call it up right now, but the San Antonio Express News columnist he posted during the game, Mike Finger, Reed Sheppard lost track of Steph Castle on 2 big possessions in a row. And I'm sure whoever is in charge of Houston's drafts feels great about that. I mean, that's true. He did lose him on 2 possessions, but Reed Sheppard was the only reason why the Rockets weren't blown out in this game. Without him, it's probably not even close. So, Steph Castle has definitely been a better player overall in terms of a little over a year into their NBA careers to this point. That's completely fair to say, but as we've discussed before, there's also some wildly different circumstances here. As far as tonight's game, yeah, I don't think that should be anywhere near, or it shouldn't be a storyline at all, really. Because Reed, even with some of the lowlights late in the game where he got picked on the balance, he was the only reason why the Rockets were competitive. And this is why the Rockets, even with, we've talked about how to this point in the season, of the 9 rotation players, he had the lowest net rating. Now, that's not going to be the case in tonight's box, where I think he was +8 in his minutes. But tonight is why the Rockets have given him a longer leash. This is not like last year where, he had a slow start and Ime Udoka turned to Aaron Holiday trying to grind out games. No, like, they have no choice but to play him. Even if the results aren't that great in a given game, he can do some things that no one else on this roster, especially without Fred VanVleet, can do. So if you want to get the best version of the Rockets by April and May, you need the version of Reed Sheppard that you had tonight, at least offensively. Then hopefully defensively he improves between now and then. But the only way he's going to get better defensively, and the only way he's going to stay confident enough to keep shooting the way he did tonight, is if he plays. And so I think, tonight's the kind of game that you file away throughout the year, when if it's a game where Reed's missing his threes and he's getting picked on a little bit, it becomes easy to say, why don't they give Aaron Holiday a look? This is why. Because Reed has a gear, even if in some games, he's costing them, at the same time, you just have to grin and bear it, because the upside is worth it. He can get to spots on the floor and make shots and handle the ball. Like, he has a unique combination of traits that no one else on this current roster has. And so I think tonight's a reminder, beyond just the fact they looked really good on the big stage. You always want to see in a spotlight game like this, who steps up, who embraces the moment. I thought he did. And so that's always encouraging. But beyond that, I just think it justified why Reed has a long leash, why you have to continue to play him, because to get the best version of the Rockets, like, you have to have him. Like, it can't be said enough. Like, they get blown out in this game, in my opinion, if they don't have Reed Sheppard. Like, he was the Band-Aid in the middle 2 quarters of that game that kept them afloat when the Spurs were otherwise just out-efforting them and just dominating them across the board.
Yeah, and this is a guy, we've talked about this before, that the Rockets think could be special. They believed in him highly in the draft. Obviously, famously, Rafael Stone was saying, if we didn't get Reed, we were going to trade down. I think it's the right course of action as well. I think you could play Holiday, or you could get something else that could maybe help you right now. I think the Rockets feel like, hey, this is a good enough team. They're going to make the playoffs. We need Reed Sheppard to grow up fast. Fred VanVleet being out all year, it's accelerated the timeline. He's thrust into a role that I don't think they expected him to have, but he played key fourth quarter minutes tonight. And yeah, it's a balance, like, there was no doubt that him being out there, the defense had a weak link on some of the rotations, no question, but he was so good offensively. You pointed out, it's the only guy in the box played more than 6 minutes that was positive in the plus minus tonight. He was +8 in his 26 minutes. So overall, big kudos for Reed Sheppard. I think you have to live with some of the defensive stuff for a while. So yeah, I'm quite happy with him. It's interesting that it came against Stephen Castle. Castle really wasn't having that great of a game, but did, like I said, point out, or as I pointed out earlier, had those 2 big offensive rebounds late that just kind of broke the Rockets back, the second chance opportunities. But that's where I was most surprised. I guess I shouldn't be. The Rockets were number 1 in rebounding rate coming into this game. The Spurs right behind them, number 2. So for them to match them, I don't remember what the actual final total was. Looks like it was 40. Oh, they were dead even on rebounding, 49-49. But the Spurs just, when they shot so high of a volume from 3, and they can outshoot you as a result of matching that rebounding in battle, even with the Rockets going 13 of 27 from 3, which is a blistering percentage, they just shot so many more of those threes. And the Rockets didn't beat them by volume on shots. And that's how they lost.
Yeah, and there's a good comment from the chat. The problem is Reed or Steven are such liabilities that you have to play zone. We need DFS so that we can switch everything again. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of what we saw in this game. And the offensive Reed, especially tonight when so many guys are struggling to shoot, like, I'm not saying it was a mistake to play him, absolutely not. But like, in the big picture, like, how can the Rockets get back to the version that we saw last year? And I really think this is killing Ime Udoka. I mean, a lot of it's personnel, because, if you accept that premise, and I think there's a lot of truth in it, that you're giving up a lot defensively and there's clear areas to target if it's either Reed or the double big and sometimes both, then you've basically, amongst the 9 consistent rotation players, you only have 6 guys you can trust, the 5 starters and Tari Eason. And so you look at the shooting tonight, you mentioned Jabari was 2 of 6. Şengün and KD were okay, but both were below 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Amen was just 4 of 12. Josh Okogie, he did go 4 of 7, but no one's going to say Josh Okogie is an offensive creator. And if you need him to be, something's going wrong. Tari Eason, he was good off the bench, made 3 of 4 threes, 4 of 6 overall. But the point is, you only have 6 guys. So until Dorian Finney-Smith comes back, if you're in a spot where it's difficult to play Reed or the double big, then there's only so many guys that you can turn to unless you want to, throw in Jayshawn Tate or Aaron Holiday off the scrap heap, something like that. So I think a lot of it's just personnel. Like the Rockets just sort of made the choice, and it's hard to argue with them. Like when we saw, because most of what happened, like when they saw the 11-point lead go away with that 12-0 run at the end of the first half, and then the start of the third quarter, like basically like a 20-point swing in about 9 game minutes. Well, most of it was without Reed Sheppard. So I do buy into the premise that defensive warts and all, you had to ride with Reed tonight. But in general, in terms of how do you fix the defense, I mean, at least against very good teams, I don't know that you can. Now, when you're playing some one-dimensional teams, which, the Rockets have in recent games, then you can sort of, funnel it to weaker guys and try to mitigate and hide your weak spots. But against good teams, there's not a clear answer, at least until you get Dorian Finney-Smith back. It's just you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it's hard for me to say that, they would have been better if they had stuck to, the 6 true, what you would call two-way guys. If anything, you might have been worse based on how bad the offense was at stretches tonight.
Yeah, and Rockets really don't have much time to rest here. They're on the road. They go to Milwaukee. They play Sunday afternoon. I got to give a mention to Tari Eason again because it's still eye-popping to me. Ben, I know we talked about this last game, but 3 of 4 from 3 tonight. I believe that's his 5th game. Tari Eason, his 5th game this year already through what is this? This was the 8th game, I believe.
Yeah.
8th game where he's hit 3 or more triples. And insanely efficient. He's got to be pushing 60% after tonight from 3 so far. There will be regression to the mean, just flat out. He's not Steph Curry times 2, but I mean, he looks amazing. Could this guy shoot 40% from 3 this year? That would be fantastic given what his defense is. And, obviously bet on himself. He's looking like a great bet for him so far. Although, go ahead.
We do need to mention with Tari, he only had 2 rebounds, and he was the guy that was victimized by Keldon Johnson several times on those second chance possessions. And really, I thought overall, maybe it's early in the season, but the Rockets, for whatever reason, looked not as athletic across the board as the Spurs. You mentioned the rebounding overall was a draw, which is a little bit disappointing for the Rockets team that, was tops in the league going in. But KD had 1 rebound. Josh Okogie had 3. Tari Eason had 2. Reed Sheppard had 0. Now, the latter is completely understandable because Reed's the smallest guy on the floor. But the other 3, between Tari, Okogie, and KD combining for just 6 rebounds, that's a problem. When those are the types of, in theory, you say those are two-way players. Like we discussed a couple of minutes ago, the merits of, playing Reed or the double vig versus the trade-off when you go double big with what you give up in 3-point volume. Well, if you go the two-way route, then you need to be able to rebound better than that. Or even if you do get the first stop, then other teams are going to do what Keldon Johnson did tonight. And so that's another thing. It's a little thing. Hopefully, Tari's been a good rebounder in the past, so I'm inclined to believe that for whatever reason, just an off night, but it was harmful. I'll just say that.
Yeah, it all around frustrating. It gives you a little bit of concern about the Rockets in the playoffs. Not saying that they can't succeed. There's a long time to go before we get there. But they've faced 3 really physical teams that have kind of, I guess you should say, matched the Rockets' physicality. I'd say they're 0-3 in those games. The one good news is I believe the Raptors won tonight, which means the Rockets do have 1 win this season against an above 500 team. Now,
you did it.
Yes. And, let's see how this goes from here. There are going to be some tougher matchups. You've got Orlando on the schedule coming up. You've got Cleveland coming up. You've got Milwaukee on Sunday. Anything you're looking for in that game, because you do have Giannis, against Şengün, I guess we'll say, and Giannis is a guy who, was talked about in the summer as possibly being a Rocket target. That didn't even happen because he didn't even pursue a trade. What are you looking for in that particular matchup on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee is a team that has a lot of length and athleticism. Obviously, Giannis and Miles Turner on the front line. I'm looking at their stats from tonight. They beat the Bulls, who were off to a good start, and they routed the Bulls tonight, 126 to 110. They had 53 rebounds. And so that's just a little thing. Look, the Rockets, a big part of why they were the number one offense, we'll see if they still are. I suspect they might slip because the advantage was getting sliced a little bit in recent games, and this was not a great one, especially in the half court. So it might be 2 or 3 after tonight. We'll have to see when the ratings update. But I just thought the rebounding was not where it needed to be, and people think of it in terms of second chance possessions when you're on defense, but also offensively. They didn't get the offensive boards that we're used to seeing from them. And so it's not a back-to-back, but it is an early game on Sunday. I think they put a lot into tonight. And so I'm really looking, those guys I mentioned, like KD, Josh Okogie, Tari Eason, do they have a little bit more pep in their step than they did tonight? Does Steven Adams play better? I thought, he's coming off the hip flexor strain. Maybe that was a factor tonight, but I didn't think he was as aggressive on the boards as he normally is. The first thing that Wemby said post-game, if you listen to his interview, he talked about, they did a good job against Steven Adams. I thought that's noteworthy, unsolicited. That was the first guy that he brought up. And so Steven not as impactful tonight. Maybe that's injury related. Maybe it's just the matchup. Maybe it's a bad night. I don't know. But I just want to see, can the Rockets get back to, foundationally who they are, or at least who Ime Udoka wants them to be, to go full circle. That's why I think this game was so troubling, is that it's not Ime Udoka ball at all. They were beaten in the specific areas that he wants his teams to excel in, and they did the complete opposite tonight. And the Bucks are not an identical team to the Spurs, but with Giannis and Wemby, there are some similarities. Miles Turner has some length on that front line as well. So not saying it's an apples to apples, but it's not like a total apples to oranges either. So I want to see what the Rockets do differently. And, bottom line, the Rockets are going to say in all their quotes, they're going to single out effort as the issue because that's within their control. You're never going to hear, or rarely hear post-game, these hat tips from coaches or players, because they're trained to think, what can we control? If we just focus on our effort and everything that's within our control, what could improve the bottom line? And there's some truth in that. That's probably the right way to look at it from a coaching perspective. But in terms of just us looking at it, more practically, how much of it is effort and how much of it is the Rockets just being sort of structurally compromised, and against these types of opponents, not having enough on the defensive end of the floor, at least until they get Dorian Finney-Smith back. I don't know the answer to that, but a good showing on Sunday on the road would have me feeling a little bit better. So hopefully we see that.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to address this one comment in the chat. Jay says, why didn't Jabari play at the end? Ime did say in the press conference he never singled out Jabari. He never singles out any specific player, but just said he was looking for some, a combination that would, bring the physicality. Obviously, he wasn't, super thrilled with Jabari, I don't think, at that point in time. And I didn't necessarily see something in Jabari's play. I did have a clip that I posted where I thought he played really good defense on Sohan driving. But obviously he, the box was -17, -19, whatever it was when he was in. I don't want to single out Jabari as that being the sole reason, but something that Ime did not like. So that's my guess. I don't know. Obviously I think Jabari will probably use that as motivation, knowing him and how he is. And I think he'll come out against Milwaukee. Running that down at, Rockets are going to finish the road trip there at Milwaukee. They'll come back home for a 3-game stand. Wizards. Then the next NBA Cup game will be a week from today. Will be the Blazers, and that's no easy out. That is a
they
tough
beat the Nuggets
team
last week.
Yeah, very tough team. And then you've got the Magic as well there. Then the Rockets go back on the road to play the Cavs, and then they'll play the Nuggets at Toyota Center in a Cup game as well. So it's going to be fun. We had a nice little stretch of some cream puffs, and now we're going to see the Rockets face some really tough teams, and hopefully they'll better results than tonight. But we will see what happens on Sunday against Milwaukee, or against Giannis and Miles Turner, as you point out. So Ben, appreciate you doing this. We might be a little bit later after the game, maybe half hour after the game. We'll probably have Palo Alves with us on that game as well on Sunday. So we hope to see you all then. Unfortunate outcome tonight with the Rockets losing, but snapping a 5-game win streak. But let's see if they can get back on track on Sunday. So appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your night.